The alien slave market was loud and cruel, filled with shouting voices, clinking chains, and the cries of the captured. Buyers from different species walked through the rows, pointing at cages, laughing at those inside, and arguing over prices. The air smelled of sweat, dust, and fear. At the far end of the market, there was a small cage pushed against the wall. In that cage sat a young alien girl, thin and quiet. Her hair was tangled, her face dirty, but her eyes were bright. She held her knees close to her chest, as if trying to make herself disappear. The auctioneer, a tall creature with a sharp voice, banged his staff on the ground. "Next," he shouted, pulling the girl's chain and dragging her forward. She stumbled but stayed silent. The crowd looked at her and then turned away. "No one wants this one," the auctioneer sneered. "She is weak, useless, not worth the food she eats." The buyers laughed. Some called her cursed, others said she would bring only bad luck. The girl lowered her head. She had been through this before. Every time they tried to sell her, no one raised a hand. She was always pushed back into the cage, forgotten. Every rejection cut deeper than chains. Every laugh told her she was nothing. Today seemed no different. The auctioneer shouted her price, lowering it again and again, but not a single buyer spoke. The girl's hands trembled as she gripped the chain. She knew what it meant if no one bought her. When slaves went unsold for too long, they were taken away, and no one ever saw them again. The crowd grew bored. "Enough," one alien said. "Throw her back, she is worthless." Others agreed. The auctioneer's face twisted in anger. "Worthless trash," he spat. He raised his staff to strike her down before dragging her away for good. The girl closed her eyes, waiting for the pain, waiting for the end. But then, a calm voice rose above the noise. "I'll take her." The market froze. Heads turned, whispers spread like fire. Standing at the edge of the crowd was a human man, tall and steady. His clothes were worn from travel, his face rough from dust, but his eyes were sharp and clear. The auctioneer blinked. "What did you say, human?" "I said I'll take her," the man repeated. His voice was firm, calm, and without hesitation. The crowd erupted in laughter. "A human? Buying her?" One alien mocked. "He must be mad." Another sneered. "She's worthless." The auctioneer narrowed his eyes. "Why would you waste money on this one? She cannot work, she cannot fight, she cannot even speak properly." The human stepped closer, reaching into his pouch. "That's my choice," he said simply. He tossed a few coins of strange metal, richer than the usual market money. The auctioneer caught them, his greedy eyes widening. The girl looked up at the human, her lips parting in shock. No one had ever spoken for her. No one had ever chosen her. For the first time in her life, someone wanted her. The auctioneer growled but waved his hand. "Fine, she is yours. Take the cursed one, human. Let her be your problem." The man opened the cage, bent down, and unlocked the chains on her wrists. His touch was gentle, nothing like the harsh hands of guards. The girl stared at him, her heart racing. "Why?" she whispered, her voice almost too soft to hear. The human gave a small smile. "Because no one else did." The crowd watched with shock and whispers as the human led the girl away. Some spat in anger, others laughed. But in their eyes there was also curiosity. What was he planning? Why risk taking the unwanted? As they stepped out of the market, the girl glanced back one last time at the cage that had been her prison. Her chains were gone, but fear still gripped her. She did not yet know if she was truly free, but one thing was certain. Her life had changed the moment the human stepped forward. The slave market noise still echoed in the girl's ears as she walked beside the human. Her steps were weak and the ground felt strange without the cage bars beneath her. Every few moments she looked up at him, unsure if this was real or just another cruel dream. The crowd behind them whispered. Some laughed, others shook their heads. A few spat in disgust. "A human bought her? He will regret it," they muttered. The human ignored them, his pace steady, his hand lightly holding the end of her broken chain, not pulling, not forcing, just guiding. The girl dared to speak, her voice low and uncertain. "Why me? Out of all the slaves, why me?" The human glanced down at her. His face was calm, unreadable, but his eyes carried something different from everyone else she had seen. "Because no one else would," he answered simply. His words were strange. They carried no cruelty, no mockery, only truth. Yet the girl could not believe so easily. She had lived too long with betrayal. "You don't know what I am," she whispered. "You don't know the curse." The man stopped for a moment, turning to face her. "I don't believe in curses," he said. His tone was steady, firm. The market guards behind them frowned at his words, watching closely. As they reached the edge of the market, two alien guards blocked their path. Their eyes glowed with suspicion. "The girl does not belong to you, human," one said harshly. "She is property of the House of Chains. You cannot take her without permission. The human's hand tightened slightly on the broken chain, but his voice remained calm. I paid, the auctioneer accepted. The second guard sneered. That means nothing. This girl carries blood that should never leave. She belongs to the house. Return her or face punishment. The girl's heart sank. She knew this moment would come. They never let her go far. She was a prize they called worthless. Yet they refused to release. For a breath, silence stretched between them. The human's eyes narrowed. His hand slid to his belt where a blade rested, not large but sharp. His voice was quiet, yet carried a weight that made even the guards pause. She walks with me now. The guards hissed in anger, but something in his eyes made them hesitate. They were used to fear, but the human showed none. After a tense moment, the guards stepped aside, muttering curses in their alien tongue. The girl stared at him, her heart racing. You would fight for me? She asked in disbelief. He looked at her again, his gaze steady. If I must, he said. They moved quickly out of the market, through narrow streets lit by glowing lamps. The city around them buzzed with life. But the girl felt every stare. Every alien who looked their way saw her and whispered. Some pointed, others laughed. A cursed girl walking beside a human. It was something unheard of. Fear gripped her again. They will come for me, she whispered. They always come. The human did not stop walking. Then let them, he replied. His calmness confused her. It was as if danger meant nothing to him, as if he carried a strength she could not understand. She tried to match his pace, though her legs trembled. For the first time, someone was leading her away, not to chains, not to another cage, but to freedom. Yet deep inside, she could not trust it. Not yet. She glanced at him again. You don't even know my name, she said softly. The human gave the faintest of smiles. Then tell me. She hesitated, then whispered, Lyra. He nodded once. Lyra, I'm Kyle. The sound of his name felt strange, almost warm. The girl held it close, not knowing why. As they disappeared into the dark streets, shadows moved behind them. Slaver eyes followed, hunters waiting. The girl did not know if this human was her savior or enough. Your mistake. But every step away from the cage felt like the start of something she had never dared to dream of.
The night air outside the slave market was heavy and restless. Lyra walked close to Kale, her thin hands holding the chain that now dragged loose from her wrists. The city lights glowed in the distance, but every shadow looked dangerous. Behind them, the sound of boots echoed. Kale's eyes sharpened. He knew they were being followed. Lyra felt it too, her steps growing quicker. They won't let me go, she whispered, her voice trembling. Kale placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Stay close, he said. His tone was calm, but his hand moved near the small blade hidden at his belt. They turned down a narrow street, hoping to disappear, but 3 alien guards stepped out, blocking the path. Their armor glistened under the street lamps, and their cruel smiles showed they had been waiting. The girl belongs to the House of Chains, the leader growled. Return her now, human, and we may spare your life. Lyra froze, her heart pounding. She had seen these guards before. They were the ones who beat slaves for amusement. They had called her worthless, cursed, and now they looked at her as if she was prey. Kale did not move. She is mine now. I paid, he said firmly. The guard laughed. Your coins mean nothing, human. Hand her over, or bleed where you stand. Without warning, one of the guards lunged. Kale reacted fast, his blade flashing in the dim light. The strike was not wild, but sharp and precise. The alien cried out, stumbling back with a wound across his arm. Lyra gasped. She had never seen anyone fight for her. Humans fought differently, with speed and focus, not with cruelty but with purpose. The second guard rushed forward. Kale ducked low, knocking him off balance. His fist slammed into the guard's chest, sending him crashing into the wall. The leader hissed in anger, drawing a long weapon that crackled with energy. He pointed it at Kale. You will die for this insolence. Kale pulled Lyra behind him. Run when I say, he whispered. His body was tense, ready. The weapon hummed, glowing brighter. But before the leader could strike, a voice from the street shouted, Guards! Trouble near the market. Lights began to appear down the road, more patrols arriving. The guards cursed. They did not want witnesses. The leader glared at Kale, his eyes full of hate. This is not over, human. The girl is ours. You cannot hide her forever. With that, he motioned to his men, and they disappeared into the shadows. Kale let out a slow breath, his blade still ready. He turned to Lyra, who stared at him in shock. You fought them, she whispered. They always win, they always take, but you, Kale placed the blade back at his belt. I told you, you walk with me now. Her eyes filled with confusion and something else, something like hope. She had never been defended, never been protected. Why risk so much for me? She asked again, her voice breaking. Cale met her gaze. His answer was quiet but firm, because you deserve a chance. The patrol lights grew brighter. Cale pulled her hand. We can't stay here, he said. They slipped into the maze of alleys, moving quickly through the city's hidden paths. Every step was filled with tension. Lyra glanced over her shoulder again and again, fearing the guard's return, yet Cale never wavered, his presence a wall between her and the danger. As they finally reached the outer edge of the city, the stars spread wide above them, the noise of the market faded behind, but the memory of the guard's promise lingered. Lyra's voice trembled as she whispered, they will keep hunting us, won't they? Cale looked at the horizon, his jaw set. Let them try. For the first time, Lyra felt a spark inside her, fragile but real. Maybe, just maybe, she was not worthless. Maybe the human who stepped forward had given her more than freedom. He had given her a reason to hope.
The desert stretched beyond the city, silent under the pale moonlight. Kyle and Lyra walked far from the slave market, their steps sinking into soft sand. Every sound felt sharp, the whisper of the wind, the crunch of footsteps, the distant cry of night creatures. They stopped near the ruins of an old stone building, its walls broken and covered in dust. Cale led Lyra inside, where shadows gave them cover. He lit a small fire with practiced hands, the flames flickering weakly but giving warmth. Lyra sat close to the fire, her thin arms wrapped around her knees. She watched Kyle in silence, his face glowing orange from the flames. He was calm, but his eyes were always alert, always scanning the dark around them. Finally, Lyra whispered, "You don't know what they call me. You don't know why no one wanted me." Kyle looked at her, waiting. His silence told her he would listen, not mock. "They call me cursed," she said softly. Her voice shook. "My family, they left me. They said I brought shame, that my blood is dangerous. They handed me to the slavers. I thought, maybe it was true." Her words fell like broken glass. For a long moment she stared into the fire, afraid he would laugh, afraid he would walk away. But Kyle did not move. His voice was steady. "I don't believe in curses." She looked at him, her eyes wide. "Then why do they fear me?" "Because fear is easy," Kale answered. "It's easier to call someone cursed than to understand them. It's easier to chain than to care." Lyra's throat tightened. Her whole life she had heard only hatred. Now his words felt like water to dry earth. Still, doubt filled her. "But if they find me, if they take me back, they will kill you too. I am not worth that risk." Kale leaned forward, his gaze fixed on her. "Not while I breathe," he said firmly. The fire popped, sparks rising into the night. Lyra's eyes stung. She turned, her face away so he would not see her tears, but her heart, which had been cold for so long, began to feel warmth she had never known. Outside, faint sounds echoed in the desert, the shuffle of boots, the hiss of voices. Kale's head lifted, his hand moving to his blade. "They're close," he murmured. Lyra froze, fear rushing back. "The slavers," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "They always find me." Kale stood, his figure tall against the firelight. "Then we'll move before they reach us," he said. He kicked dirt over the fire, plunging them into darkness. The ruins grew silent, but in the distance, torchlight glimmered. Shadows moved across the sand, hunting. Kale held out his hand to her. "Trust me." Her heart pounded. Every part of her wanted to run, to hide, but something in his steady voice held her together. She placed her small hand in his, and he pulled her close. As they slipped through the broken wall, the night swallowed them. The ruins behind them filled with slaver voices, angry and searching. Lyra whispered, "They won't stop." Kale tightened his grip on her hand. "Neither will I." In that moment, she realized the truth. He had not chosen her out of pity, nor out of greed. He had chosen her because he saw something even she could not see, and for the first time in her life, Lyra dared to believe she was more than a curse. The night desert was endless, the dunes rising and falling like waves of a silent sea. Kyle and Lyra moved quickly across the sand, their footprints fading behind them in the wind. The stars above burned cold, giving light but no warmth. Every few moments, Lyra looked back. In the distance, she saw moving lights, torches, glowing weapons, hunters. Her breath quickened. "They are following us," she whispered. Kale nodded, his eyes sharp. "Keep moving," he said. His voice was steady, but she could hear the weight in it. They were not just walking, they were running for their lives. Hours passed, their legs grew heavy. Sand dragged at their feet. Lyra stumbled more than once, but each time Kael caught her arm before she fell, he never let her go. Finally, they reached a cliff of rock rising above the dunes. They climbed to the top and rested in the shadows. Below them, the desert stretched wide, and in the far distance, the hunters' lights glimmered like stars on the ground. Lyra hugged her knees, trembling. "They won't stop," she said. "They will chase us until they take me back. I told you I bring only trouble." Kael sat beside her, breathing hard but calm. He shook his head. "You are not trouble," he said. "They are." His voice carried quiet strength. For a moment the wind howled, lifting sand into the air. The noise of the hunters grew nearer, their shouts echoing across the dunes. Kael stood, looking at the horizon. "We move again," he said. They descended the cliff and pressed forward, deeper into the desert. The land grew harsher, the sand sharper, and the air colder. Lyra's legs weakened, her body begging for rest. Still, she pushed on, guided by Kael's presence beside her. At last, they reached a stretch of broken stone and half-buried ruins, pillars from some forgotten age. Lyra touched one, whispering, "I've heard stories of this place. They say it is hell." "Unted," Kael glanced around. "Haunted or not, it gives us cover," he replied. They slipped into the ruins, hiding among broken walls and fallen statues. The firelight of the hunters soon appeared at the edge of the ruins, shadows moving, searching. Lyra's chest tightened, fear squeezing her heart. She whispered, "If they catch me, they will kill you first. They will make me watch." Her voice shook with terror. Kael crouched beside her, his blade in hand. His eyes were calm, steady as stone. "Then we don't let them catch us," he said. The hunters' voices grew louder, footsteps crunching against rock. Kael motioned for silence. He placed a hand gently on her arm. His touch was firm, reassuring. "No fear," he whispered. The hunters entered the ruins, their torches burning. Their eyes scanned the shadows, weapons ready. Lyra clutched her chest, her heart hammering. She felt Kael's calm like a shield. One of the hunters shouted, "They are here!" The sound rang through the ruins, and suddenly light flooded the stones. Kael rose in one motion, his blade flashing. He struck the first hunter before the alien could react. Lyra gasped, watching him fight not with rage but with precision, every move made to protect. But there were too many. Shadows swarmed, voices shouted, weapons hissed with energy, the ruins filled with chaos. Kael pulled Lyra behind a broken pillar, his breath hard. "Stay low," he ordered. His blade dripped with dust and blood. His eyes glowed with determination. Lyra pressed against the stone, trembling. Yet in her chest, a strange spark stirred. She felt anger, not only fear, anger at those who hunted her, anger at those who had called her worthless. The hunters closed in, their lights surrounding the ruins. The leader's voice roared, "Give us the girl, human, and we may let you crawl away." Kael lifted his blade higher, his voice cold as steel. "Over my dead body." And in that moment, Lyra realized something. She was not just running anymore. She was standing beside someone who refused to abandon her. And for the first time, she felt the stir of courage inside her own heart. Kael pulled Lyra behind a broken pillar, his breath hard. "Stay low," he ordered. His blade dripped with dust and blood. His eyes glowed with determination. Lyra pressed against the stone, trembling. Yet in her chest, a strange spark stirred. She felt anger, not only fear, anger at those who hunted her, anger at those who had called her worthless. The hunters closed in, their lights surrounding the ruins. The leader's voice roared, "Give us the girl, human, and we may let you crawl away." Kael lifted his blade higher, his voice cold as steel. "Over my dead body." And in that moment, Lyra realized something. She was not just running anymore. She was standing beside someone who refused to abandon her. And for the first time, she felt the stir of courage inside her own heart. The ruins shook with voices as the hunters closed in. Their torches burned bright, their weapons glowing. The night air carried the hiss of metal and the crackle of energy. Kael stood tall in front of Lyra, blade in hand, his shoulders squared, his eyes sharp. He looked like a wall against the storm. Lyra crouched behind a broken pillar, her breath fast, her body trembling. The leader of the hunters stepped forward, his armor reflecting firelight. His eyes glowed red. "Give us the girl, human," he growled. "She belongs to us. She carries the blood of shame. Hand her over and we may spare you." Kael's grip tightened on his blade. His voice was calm but heavy. "She belongs to no one." The hunters hissed with rage, and with a shout they rushed. Kael moved fast, faster than Lyra thought possible. His blade struck the first attacker with sharp precision, knocking the weapon from his hands. Another hunter swung at him. Kale ducked low and drove his fist into the alien's ribs. The sound of cracking bone echoed. The hunter collapsed with a scream, but there were too many. They came from every side. Their torches lit the ruins like a cage of fire. Kyle fought without pause, but the weight pressed harder and harder. Lyra's heart pounded. Her eyes widened as she watched him bleed. A cut across his arm, another across his side. Yet he did not falter. His movements were strong, fierce, like a man who refused to fall. The leader laughed darkly. "You cannot win, human. She is ours." He raised a long staff crackling with energy, aiming at Kale's chest. Lyra gasped. "Kale!" she cried. She ran forward without thinking. Her small hands grabbed a fallen stone and hurled it. The rock struck the leader's head, not enough to kill, but enough to break his aim. The staff's energy blast shot wide, exploding against the ruins. The hunters shouted, surprised. For a moment, silence broke. Through the chaos, Kale turned to Lyra, his eyes wide. "Stay back," he ordered. His voice was sharp, but inside it carried fear for her. But something inside Lyra had awakened. A heat, a strange strength. She felt it in her chest, in her blood. It spread like fire through her arms. Her eyes burned with a faint glow. One of the hunters lunged at her, but before Kale could reach him, Lyra raised her hand. A pulse of invisible force burst outward, throwing the hunter back into the wall with a crash. The ruins fell into silence for a heartbeat. Everyone stared. Kyle, the hunters, even Lyra herself. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her hands shaking. I didn't mean to," she whispered. The leader's eyes widened with fury. "So it is true," he hissed. "The cursed blood lives." He raised his weapon again. "That power belongs to us." Kale stepped in front of Lyra, his voice cutting like steel. "It belongs to her." With a roar, the hunters charged again. The fight turned brutal. Kale struck with desperate strength. Lyra, trembling but determined, reached for the strange power inside her. Another wave of energy pulsed from her hands, scattering sand and knocking two hunters off their feet. The ruins echoed with screams, crashes, and the clash of steel. Kale's blade dripped red, his breath heavy, but he never stepped back. Finally, the leader, battered and furious, realized his men were falling. He snarled, blood dripping from his lip. "This isn't over, human. The girl cannot escape her fate." With that, he retreated into the night, dragging the wounded hunters with him. Silence returned to the ruins. Kale dropped to one knee, breathing hard. His blade hung loose in his hand. Blood stained his side. Lyra rushed to him, tears in her eyes. "You're hurt," she whispered. Kale looked up at her, weak but steady. "So are they," he said with a faint smile. Lyra trembled, her hands glowing faintly. She looked at them in fear. "This power, it is why they hate me," she whispered. Kale's voice was soft but firm. "No, Lyra, it is why you are meant for more." And in the ruins, under the cold stars, she began to wonder if maybe he was right. The ruins lay quiet after the battle. The torches of the hunters had burned out, and the desert wind carried away the last echoes of their retreat. Lyra knelt beside Kyle, her hands shaking as she tried to clean the blood on his arm. Her heart raced with fear. "You fought for me. You could have died," she whispered. Kyle winced, but gave a faint smile. "I told you, Lyra, not while I breathe." Her eyes filled with tears. She had lived her whole life being told she was cursed, worthless, and unwanted. Yet here was someone bleeding for her, choosing her, standing against the world for her. The weight of it pressed heavy on her heart. The night stretched long. Stars filled the sky like silver fire. Kale leaned against a broken wall, his breathing slow but steady. Lyra sat beside him, unable to look away. Her voice trembled. "You should leave me, Kale. If you stay with me, they will never stop hunting you." Kale turned his head, his eyes sharp despite his wounds. "Then let them hunt," he said calmly. "They will not take you back." Lyra stared at him, speechless. Slowly she lowered her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why? Why would you care for me when no one else ever did?" Kale's answer was simple, steady as stone. "Because you deserve more than chains." The words broke through her like sunlight breaking the dark. She pressed her hands to her chest, feeling the strange new power that had awakened in her. It frightened her, but it also gave her hope. By dawn, Kale had gathered his strength enough to stand. His arm was wrapped in cloth torn from his own shirt. He glanced at Lyra. "We can't stay here. More will come." Together they walked out of the ruins, climbing a tall dune that overlooked the desert. The rising sun painted the sky in gold and red. Sand sparkled like fire. For the first time in years, Lyra felt the warmth not as punishment, but as promise. She looked at Kyle, her voice trembling. I am not cursed? Kyle shook his head firmly. No, you are free, Lyra. What you carry is not shame, it is strength. Her eyes burned with tears. She had never been told such words, never believed she could be anything but a burden. Now, standing at the edge of the endless desert with a human beside her, she began to believe. Still, doubt whispered in her chest. What if they come again? What if I bring you nothing but danger? Kale glanced at her, his mouth curving into a faint smile. Then we faced them together. Silence stretched between them, but it was not empty. It was full of meaning, full of unspoken trust. At last, Lyra whispered, Then I will not run anymore. If you stand with me, I will stand too. Kale placed a hand gently on her shoulder, steady and sure. That's all I ask. The desert wind rose, lifting her tangled hair. She closed her eyes, feeling the chains of the past fall away. No longer the cursed girl in the last cage. She was Lyra, walking into the unknown with someone who saw her worth. As they descended the dune together, the horizon stretched wide. Behind them, the slave market and its cruel laughter were only memories. Ahead of them lay danger, yes, but also freedom. For the first time, Lyra smiled, faint but real. Her voice was soft, but it carried strong meaning. Not free, alone, she whispered. Free, with you. Kale looked at her, his eyes calm, and for a moment, even the endless desert felt like a place of hope. The desert morning was quiet, but Kale's sharp eyes never rested. He walked beside Lyra, guiding her across the dunes. Behind them, the slave market was far, but danger still clung to the wind. Lyra glanced at him often, her steps slow from exhaustion. Her mind was full of questions. Where are we going? She asked softly. Kale adjusted the strap of his pack. Somewhere safe, he said. Away from the slavers. Away from their chains. Safe. The word sounded strange to Lyra. She had never known such a place. Yet as she walked beside Kale, hope flickered like a small flame inside her. But far behind them, in the shadows of the ruined market, the slaver leader stood before his master, his armor still scarred from the fight with Kale, his eyes burned with hatred. The human is dangerous, he spat. He defied us. He stole the cursed one. The master was taller, cloaked in black. His voice was cold as stone. Then bring them back, he ordered. Alive if you can, dead if you must. The slaver bowed, his lips curling into a cruel smile. He raised his hand, and dozens of hunters stepped from the darkness, ready to ride. Back in the desert, Lyra stopped at the top of a dune. Her chest rose and fell quickly. Kale, she whispered, they will never stop, will they? Kyle turned to her, his gaze firm. No, he admitted, but neither will we. They moved again, the desert stretching endless before them. By midday, they reached an oasis, hidden by tall rocks and scattered trees. Water sparkled under the sun. For the first time in days, Lyra knelt and drank freely, her body trembling with relief. Kale filled a small flask, keeping his eyes on the horizon. We rest here, only for a while, he said. Lyra sat on the sand, watching him. Her heart was heavy. Kale, she said softly, why do you risk everything for me? You could walk away and live free, but you stay. He looked at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he said quietly, because once I was chained too. Lyra froze, her eyes widened. Kale had never spoken of his past. You. Kale nodded, his eyes distant. Not as a slave, but as a soldier. I fought for others who cared nothing for me. They gave orders. I obeyed. My freedom was an illusion. When I walked away, I swore I'd never leave another behind. Lyra's chest ached. She whispered, So you saved me because you know what it feels like. Kale's voice was low but steady. Yes. For a brief moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the soft splash of water. Lyra looked down at her hands, the faint glow she had felt the night before still haunting her. Kale, she whispered, what if this power inside me is dangerous? What if it hurts you? Kale shook his head firmly. Then we learn to control it. You are not dangerous, Lyra. You are strong. Before she could answer, the sound of horns echoed across the desert. Kale's head snapped up. On the far horizon, dust clouds rose, shadows moving fast across the dunes. Lyra's heart froze. They found us, she whispered. Kale's eyes hardened. He grabbed her hand, pulling her to her feet. Then we run. They left the oasis, their footsteps quick across the sand. Behind them, the slavers advanced, faster, louder, a storm of revenge chasing them. Lyra's breath came in sharp gasps, but she did not let go of Kale's hand. The fear inside her was real, but so was the spark of courage, and as the sun burned high over the desert, one truth echoed in her heart. Her new beginning was not yet safe. The shadows of revenge had already come. The desert wind howled as Kale and Lyra ran across the endless dunes. Behind them, the horns of the slavers grew louder, their riders moving fast. Clouds of dust rose on the horizon, a storm of enemies closing in. Kale's grip on Lyra's hand was firm, pulling her forward when her legs faltered. She stumbled in the sand, gasping for air. "I can't," she whispered, her voice broken. "Yes, you can," Kale said sharply. His tone was steady, like steel against the storm. "One more step, Lyra, always one more." Her legs shook, but she obeyed, step after step. Each breath burned. Yet every time she thought she would fall, Kale's presence pulled her forward. The sun burned above them, unforgiving. Sweat stung their eyes. The desert stretched endless, and the slavers' horns grew closer with every moment. Finally, they reached a valley of sharp cliffs, towering stone walls rising on either side. Kyle slowed, pulling Lyra into the narrow passage. The air was cooler here, shadows covering their path. But Lyra's chest was tight with fear. She looked at Kale, her voice trembling. "We're trapped. If they come, we can't escape." Kale scanned the cliffs, his jaw set. "Sometimes you don't run," he said. "Sometimes you stand." The sound of hooves and boots echoed, filling the valley. The slavers appeared at the mouth of the passage, torches glowing, weapons raised. The leader's voice thundered, "There is no escape, human. Hand over the cursed one, and perhaps we'll let you live." Lyra clutched Kale's arm, fear choking her. "Kale, there are too many," she whispered. Her body trembled. Kale's eyes never left the enemy. His blade gleamed in the dim light. His voice was quiet but strong. "Then they'll have to bleed for every step." The hunters surged forward, shouting. Kyle met them head-on. His blade moved like lightning, striking fast and true. The narrow valley worked in his favor, forcing the enemy to come one by one, but for every hunter that fell, more pushed forward. The clash of steel echoed through the cliffs. Lyra pressed against the wall, her hands shaking. Her heart screamed to hide, but something inside her pushed back. She remembered the night at the ruins, the moment her power had burst from her hands. The memory of that strength burned in her chest. She closed her eyes, her voice trembling. "Please, not fear this time." A hunter lunged at Kale from the side. Kyle turned too late. But before the blade could strike, a wave of invisible force slammed the hunter back into the stone wall. His weapon clattered to the ground. Kale glanced at Lyra, his eyes wide. Her hands glowed faintly, her chest rising and falling with sharp breaths. She whispered, "I won't let them take you." The hunters hesitated, fear flickering in their eyes. The leader snarled, "So the cursed blood awakens, all the more reason to drag her back." He raised his weapon, shouting, "Kill the human, take the girl alive." The fight raged harder. Kale fought with desperate strength, blood dripping from his side. Lyra stood trembling, but each time fear tried to crush her, she pushed back with her power. Another wave burst from her hands, knocking two hunters to the sand. The valley roared with chaos, dust rising, steel clashing, voices shouting. Kale's movement slowed with exhaustion, but his will did not break. Lyra ran to his side, tears streaming. "You can't fall, Kale, please, not now." Kale looked at her, his breath heavy. "I won't, not while you stand with me." The hunters closed in again, but the desert wind rose, carrying sand in a violent storm. The valley filled with blinding dust. The hunters cursed, stumbling. Their torches flickered, their lines broke. Kale pulled Lyra close, whispering, "The storm is our chance." Together they moved through the chaos, vanishing into the sand's fury. Behind them, the hunters shouted in rage, blinded by the storm. Their horns echoed, but Kale and Lyra were gone. And as the storm swallowed the valley, Lyra felt something new in her chest. Not just fear, not just hope, but strength. For the first time, she was not running alone. She was fighting. The desert storm raged through the valley, blinding the hunters with sand and fury. Kyle held Lyra close as they pressed forward, their bodies pushed by the violent wind. Grit stung their eyes, the sound of thunder rolling above. When the storm passed, silence fell. The dunes had shifted, covering their tracks. The hunters were nowhere in sight, but Kyle knew it was not the end. He leaned against a rock, breathing hard, his side bleeding through the cloth. Lyra knelt beside him, her hands trembling. "You can't go on like this," she whispered. Her eyes burned with fear. "You're hurt, and they will find us again." Kale looked at her, his voice steady though weak. "I'll keep moving, Lyra. As long as I stand, you're safe." Her heart broke at his words. For so long she believed herself a curse. Yet this human treated her as worth more than his own life. Tears blurred her vision. "I can't lose you," she whispered. "Not you." Before Kale could answer, the sound of horns rose again. The hunters had not been swept away. They were coming. Faster, louder. Their leader's voice roared across the dunes. "There is no escape, girl. Your blood is ours." Kale pushed himself up, blade in hand. His body swayed, but his eyes burned with fire. "Then they'll have to bleed for it." Lyra's hands glowed faintly, her power stirring. She shook her head. "No, Kale, not this time. You've carried me this far. Now I will stand with you." The hunters crested the dune, their torches glowing like angry stars. They charged with weapons raised. Kale planted his feet in the sand. Lyra stepped beside him, her small frame trembling but unyielding. The first wave struck. Kale's blade slashed with desperate strength, cutting through steel and flesh. Lyra raised her hands, a pulse of force exploding outward, throwing 3 hunters into the sand. The leader pushed forward, his weapon glowing bright. "You are cursed," he shouted. "That power belongs to us." Lyra's eyes blazed, her voice stronger than ever before. "I am not cursed, I am free." Her hands burst with light, the force slamming into the leader, shattering his weapon. He staggered back, stunned. Kael seized the moment, his blade striking true. The leader fell to the sand with a roar that echoed into silence. The remaining hunters froze, fear flashing in their eyes. Without their leader, their courage crumbled. They fled into the desert night, leaving only their fallen behind. Silence fell again, broken only by Kael's heavy breathing. He dropped to his knees, his blade falling into the sand. Lyra rushed to him, catching his shoulders. "Kale," she cried. He looked at her, his face pale but his eyes calm. "You're safe now," he whispered. Her tears fell freely. "Not just safe, Kael, free," she said. "Because of you." He gave a faint smile, his voice barely above the wind. "No, Lyra, because of us." She held him tightly, her glowing hands pressing to his wounds. Her power flowed not as violence, but as warmth. The bleeding slowed, his breath eased. Kael stared at her in awe. "You're healing me." Lyra nodded, her tears falling onto his chest. "I'm not a curse, Kael, I never was." When dawn broke, the desert was quiet again. The storm had passed. The hunters were gone. Lyra and Kael stood at the edge of the dunes, the sun rising before them. Kael's arm rested on her shoulder for support, but his smile was steady. Lyra looked at him, her voice soft but full of strength. "Where do we go now?" Kael's eyes met hers. "Wherever we choose." She smiled through her tears, her voice trembling but firm. "Then promise me, Kael. Promise me you will never leave." His hand squeezed hers gently. "That is my final promise," he said. Together, they walked into the horizon, not as master and slave, not as cursed and savior, but as 2 souls bound by freedom. And for the first time, Lyra felt not fear, not chains, not shame. She felt life.